Welcome back to LivAnimated.com. Let's learn something new. I have a very cool guest with me tonight, Damon Shelton. What's up, man? How you doing?
I've been good, man. It's been quite a while since we worked together at LucasArts.
I know it's been a long time, and we're going to get into that too.
Yeah.
So this channel is based on bringing on people that work in the video games industry to help and inspire others who are looking to get into the industry. You may already be in the industry, but you may want to change direction. So our guest tonight is actually a technical director. So what are some of the things you do as a technical director where you are right now? You're at the Capture Lab at Electronic Arts.
Yeah, it was the Capture Lab for 23 years, back in September. It's part of kind of a central group for EA that covers every ground across from doing character art to environments to lighting to audio and even, tool development and motion capture. And so our group is, it was Capture Lab, which is what it's been known for a long time, but now we're actually, the rebrand is, the whole group is now EA Create, which they announced in September, and Capture is a part of that group, so we're just really breaking it down to this domain. So we don't have to always explain ourselves every time we talk to someone new and they're like, well, what is Capture Lab, right? My role is to direct and manage kind of the overall pipelines and technologies and hardware and stuff. So in Capture, that's not just motion capture. We do all of our scanning. And we have portable scan rigs we've developed that we fly around the world constantly scanning like sports talent for, all our sports titles. And so it's a very wide variety of stuff that I'm managing. And I'm doing it for the global group.
That's awesome. Do you still get to be hands-on with things, or is it all just management at this point?
I do get hands-on on some stuff when it's out of necessity. I try to stay in my role. I have to manage a lot, so I try to stay off of the current production need tasks. Mm-hmm. But I am doing hands-on stuff for future development and AR and where
the R&D of stuff
going,
of this is the new technology
going and kind of laying groundwork for when the tech team that I manage gets to a point where now they're moving to those tasks and they can take on and do the production part of it, and it wasn't just sitting there as an idea, right?
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
It's a lot of fun.
So let's go way back. Let's go back to when you guys started. It looks like you didn't start. Back? Yeah, way back. So you went to the Art Institute of Houston.
Yes.
So at that point, did you know you wanted to be a technical director? Was it something that you just kind of approached as you were longer in the industry, or how did you come about
it's
choosing this school?
Well, when I first went to the Art Institute, I thought my direction in life was going to be doing advertising, like graphic design.
Okay.
Because that's what I was. Because I was always an artist.
Yeah, see, it's 1996 to 98, so games weren't the same.
No,
they were pretty big. I mean, I think Tomb Raider was out for PS1. That was
about when Toy Story came out, too.
Yeah, Toy Story, yeah.
Especially the 3D world at that time. I'd already been working since I was 14 as like a game designer on like text-based RPGs.
Oh, wow.
IRC and stuff before they were doing 2D sprites and all of that. So I didn't go to school until 4 years after I'd already started.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. So wait, did you did that in high school, or was this an extracurricular program outside of high school?
It was on the side as work.
Oh, wow.
I was freelancing on when I wasn't.
Child labor laws. You don't want to say too much.
Well, back then I was allowed to work at that age.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They've had a lot of changes since then, because that was back in 92, 91, 92, I think, somewhere around there when I started.
Yeah, if you go 4 years back, it'd be 92. Yeah. So what are some of the things you learned, I guess, on the job before you went to school? And were you like, I just need to get a degree in this so I can be legit? Or were you just like, I want to learn more? Like, what was the motivation for you to go to Art Institute of Houston?
I mean, in most of the industry, especially back then, like, degree was an important piece of being hired, not just work experience, right? So I had work experience, but, I'm applying against people that at that time were getting lots of degrees in, like, engineering or something like that. Now, the technical side didn't come until years later. It was all about the art side at that point. And when I went to the Art Institute to look at their graphic design course, it was their first round of just starting their 3D animation course way back then. There was no specialization there. It was just digital animation. So,
Yeah.
So, it was very broad learning of it and more about learning how to use, 3D DOS and
Yeah.
some of
I went
those
to the Art
tools.
Institute of Pittsburgh, and at that time, we still had those blue SGI machines and stuff. So you guys had those too,
No,
right?
we were.
You didn't even have
we
that?
were still on some, PCs.
Oh,
And
my goodness.
we got offered some SGIs at one point, which the school turned down because they didn't have anyone who could teach it or support it too.
Right.
Even though they were going to get them free, it was a whole lab of them, but they made that choice.
Yeah, when we had ours, we didn't have anyone really to teach him. We had a guy who he got it, I guess, that break before school started,
Yeah.
and he just learned how to navigate and do things, and then that's what he taught us when we were in class. And then after that, everything switched over to Maya at that point. So,
Yeah,
like Maya 1.
For me, I didn't actually start using Maya until early 2000s.
Oh, wow.
So my path kind of has jumped back and forth between film and TV and commercials and video games and VFX, and I haven't really stayed one path that was just like video games or something in that sense. And that I feel has kind of helped me do it for so long.
To easily adapt to things,
is adapting and always learning, and back then it was doing artwork, it was game design, and then it was like, ooh, 2D sprites, that's cool, that's a newer thing, and started working on doing contract for doing 2D sprites and things like that. And then when I went to the Art Institute, that's when I discovered 3D and was like, whoa, this is what I'm doing. I'm not going to do that graphic design.
So what was your track that you were on there? Because I know it's set up a little different from a four-year school and how the Art Institute does things. Were you on like a animation track? Were you on the graphic design track or the IDT?
It was a digital animation.
Digital animation?
So
okay.
my degree was an associate's in digital animation.
Okay.
So we learned, doing 2D stuff and director and old school before there was what was it called, Flash and stuff like that. It was like pre-Flash, and so we learned doing hand-drawn 2D, but doing it, digitizing it, right? So scanning it in and then doing overlay paints in Photoshop, which was very early Photoshop at that time. But
yeah, it was like Photoshop 2, 1 maybe when you did it. Yeah.
And over time, what I gained most from just taking the course was really learning tools of the trade that I wouldn't have had access to, right? I didn't, especially that was so early on. I was one of their first graduating classes in their 3D program, which was new to most schools. And that was more of a learning path. I learned more in the sense of doing it as a job and continuing after school, but during school, it did give me access to tools I wouldn't have had access to. I wouldn't have gone into 3D had I not gone to the Art Institute probably until much later.
What did you have access to when you were 14? What programs were you using? Or were you using like MS Paint or something like that? Or
Debabilizer.
I remember that name. I remember that.
To palletize out for the 2D sprite work when I was doing that. But before that, like I was saying, it was just text-based RPG. Wow. So that was an IRC online. It wasn't like doing it on a console or anything. That was just people going in and typing yes or pick up stick, kind of responses. Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. All right, well, cool. I was going to ask what your takeaway was, but you already talked about it, so that's awesome. That's really cool. So now that we go from school, your first job, you were a level designer at Big Sky Interactive. How was that transition from going from the Art Institute into Big Sky?
It was a hard transition because coming out of school, I got the degree, but then there was still just the lack of work experience doing the 3D work that I was trying to get into, because games were all moving to 3D and they were not so much 2D sprite based. I was in Austin. At that point, that was like after the Origin days, and it was right at that transition where there wasn't a lot of options at the time. It built back up for a while, but actually the way I got the job at Big Sky, which it went through transitions. It was actually Daylight Productions when I started, and then they were bought by Callisto out of France, so we became Callisto USA, and then
so they could
after
have,
that
they could have a hub
down,
here.
We kind of formed it as Big Sky Interactive and continued the titles we were on. They worked out the publishing deal with
Nice.
the publishers. So I only just listed as one because it was a couple years, but we went through
No,
a
that makes
series.
sense.
If not, then it looks like I worked
That makes
really
sense.
quickly at like 3 jobs that doesn't help on the resume. But
Yeah.
oh, you're a job jumper, you know.
Yeah, you don't want it to be
kinda
like 2 months, 2 months, 2
yeah.
months. Yeah.
when it was all one seat, one job. But getting the job, I actually met the people because I was having a hard time getting
Into the industry.
Into the industry.
Okay.
Just with the lack of work experience doing the 3D work. I knew how to do it, but I didn't have proof of that. I only had the 2D and the text-based stuff. So making that jump, it was, it wasn't easy.
So was level design what you went into because that's what was available, or?
Well, they called it level design, but I was like building the levels and texturing and lighting and doing all that.
Much
while
more.
also there wasn't a lot of split when it was a designer at that time. You also built the levels. You were the level world builder, the everything on that whole level, or the levels that you kind of, were put in charge of. But I met. So we used to go to 3D Studio Max user group that we had in Austin. And at the time I was working as a web designer, for a company. I went to one of the groups, and the owner there actually introduced me to a friend of his that worked at Daylight Productions, who I still keep in contact with, Matt Sibilia.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
He's he's been art director for years, worked on Wing Commander, all that stuff back in the day. Like, he's still around, and we catch up at GDC all the time. Make sure that if we're in the same place, we go have dinner or something. But he goes, tell you what, let you come in and take a test. And, and I hadn't been a level designer to that extent. And the test was, it was still VHS tape. So here's the training for these custom proprietary tools that they got from Callisto. And he gives me the tape, and he goes, you watch the tape, and then from that tape, you're going to build like a little bit of level, just see how you do. And I watched the tape, and then I wound up building out like several rooms and hallways, and he kind of saw that I just picked it up, so he gave me a shot.
That's awesome. Congratulations, dude.
So I got very lucky there. I met the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
Going to things like Game Dev Drink Up or these user groups is very important. And I would always tell people, make sure they're going to those. I still go to the ones we have here in LA. It's good.
Yeah, it's a good way to network, and if you're meeting people outside of who you haven't worked with or haven't gone to school with, it's a great way to meet people.
Yeah, it's a great way to actually meet people that are doing it.
Yeah.
And others that aren't doing it, and can kind of help network each other, and it's a great resource for doing that. And
That's
it
awesome.
worked for me, and that's how I wound up there. And we worked on a title that didn't ship, which was my
that
first
happens.
experience of like, whoa, I worked on something that never saw the light of day.
Yeah.
As sad as we were, but then we wound up doing the first SpongeBob game that was ever made with the Curse of the Flying Dutchman, which won like Nick Kid's Choice Award that year or something,
Nice.
which was fun. It
That
was cool.
That was a very popular show, man.
And
Very
then we
popular.
also did the video game for Jimmy Neutron for the movie.
That was a
Which
big
that
deal.
leads to my next
Yeah.
endeavor, which was going over to DNA Productions
Nice.
to wind up.
Yeah, that was a huge show when it came out too, man.
Yeah.
Everybody loved that.
Yeah, so
Jimmy
I went
Neutron.
on to work on the TV series. So I worked
nice.
with Jimmy Neutron for I don't know how many years, because we did 3 seasons of Jimmy Neutron, and but that was using Lightwave too. So I had to learn how to use Lightwave and how to.
So was Lightwave your first 3D program that you actually
No,
jumped
3D
into?
Studio Max was.
Oh, Max
I
was?
knew that
Okay.
thing inside and out, and
Okay.
and then went over there, and they were using Lightwave to do all the art, and then rigging and animation in Maya, and then spitting that back out and rendering it out in Lightwave.
So you went from level designer to character technical director. So
Well,
how was that transition?
So the transition there was a slow transition. My final title was character technical director.
Oh, okay. Did you
when
go
I
in there as a level designer? or-
When I went in there, I actually started as a PA.
Oh, wow.
I took a PA gig to get my foot in the door.
Right. Okay.
And then did kind of the same thing with the modeling group, which at DNA and the TV series, the modeling group, there were certain people that stuck to like characters or this and that, but there was a lot of just, you're building whatever you need to build. You're going to build like a Jimmy Neutron style controller or gadget, or you're going to put together a whole level,
Jack of all
like
trades.
a whole background
Everybody,
kind of thing,
you have to
and
know
you're
a lot,
modeling
do a lot of
all the
stuff.
pieces that you get from storyboard.
Nice.
So we'd get the script and the storyboards, and then have to go through the storyboards and kind of call out, oh, we need to make this device. We don't have something, and just made a list and just modeled them.
Yeah.
But it was another one of those where I did the test, and they liked the test and gave me the shot. So there was a lot of, I got the right place, right time kind of set up for my first few studio gigs. Before Big Sky and I went to school, I'd already been doing it for 4 or 5 years already, in contract working on stuff.
And you were there for 3 years. Was Jimmy Neutron taking up the bulk of that time you were there, or was there other
Yeah, we
projects?
did the 3 seasons of Jimmy Neutron, and then we did the Ant Bully movie.
Was that was your first feature, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
That was my first feature film, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Because I didn't work on the Jimmy Neutron movie, I just worked on the
okay.
series. But what I did.
Did you get to while you brought that up? Did you use the same? Did they use the same assets? Did you have any visual? Did you have anything to do with them making it there at that studio, or was that made by someone else and they just brought the IP so they can make the movie? I'm not too clear on that.
DNA did the film,
Okay.
and then they did the series.
Okay.
So they did all the.
So nothing crossed over. Nothing.
It wasn't like different companies did
okay.
it. So we did have some assets from the film that were still reused, like Jimmy and the
Right.
characters and stuff, but there was a lot of new stuff that we made.
Okay, gotcha.
By the time you get to season 3, you have so much stuff you can kind of pull from to go faster that we were actually getting done with our stuff on certain linked shows that were just happening in his neighborhood and things like that we'd be done with that in a day.
That's cool.
Between the group, rather than be like a few weeks of modeling. It would just be like, oh, we're ahead of storyboards. There's not we just double checked storyboards. There wasn't something we missed, and so we were actually, by you get to season 3, you have so much, just library of stuff you can pull from.
Yeah.
And the team was great. It was, a lot of people refer to it as the animation boot camp for people, because a lot of people in the industry doing animation now, they started there, and that was a pretty hefty track for, especially the animation team, who were doing like 1,000 frames a week to final.
And it was really well done. It was really well animated for TV series. I mean, there's a lot of shows out now that are like,
there were a lot of
not,
great
the quality bar is
animators that
not
came
there.
through there that are still big names in the industry in animation. They went through there, and what I learned most there was how to be fast and efficient, but keep the quality, and that was my big learnings that I got from there. But when I shifted on to Ant Bully, that's when I started making the trek into the tech side. So I went over there as a hard surface modeler and was building out stuff like, and then we started learning Houdini and Nuke, and we were using Maya, and I had to learn Maya on the job kind of thing. A lot of the people did because we'd been using Lightwave fully, and they wanted to then use RenderMan and stuff like that. And there was just data differences from Lightwave versus the output from Maya and some other packages. But how I got into the tech was just, at the time, there weren't enough tools there, or the tools couldn't keep up with, the workflow and speed we were going
with production.
at.
So you
So
guys
I
still had
just
to be
started
creative.
little scripts here and there, and kind of found a knack for it, and that's how I got moving to the technical side.
Where were you writing them in? I mean, you had to pick that up as well, too.
Yeah, I had to,
so
I
scripting was new
learned
to
a
you.
little in Lightwave, so L script.
Okay.
But then when we got into Maya, I started using Mel. And a lot of it was record first and copy paste, clean it up, and then I didn't have to do that task repeatedly, all those steps, and that.
So you're like self-taught when it comes to like being
on the technical side. So I didn't do any schooling for the technical.
Oh wow, that's cool.
So
I didn't know that.
But that kind of got me on the path to go the more technical route. But then on Ant Bully, it's funny, I actually got 6 credits in the film.
That's cool.
Because we wrapped up all of our world art, and they were like, hey, we need help over here. And I did jump over into that group and then worked in that group for a few months. And then, so I went through lighting and compositing and just like generalist TD work, pipeline TD work, helping with write tools and scripts, and you know, that was kind of the first foray into like proceduralism and stuff and Houdini. So like building the whole house, because we had to deal with 2 spaces, but you don't want to build everything twice. So we, you know, we're in Houdini proceduralizing, where we could then scale up detail dynamically when they had to go into ant scale, you know, and still be in the same world.
Man, that's pretty cool.
So,
it sounds like that was a really good first position.
Oh, it was great. It was really great. I was actually, my mentor in the character TD realm and rigging and all that was Michael Comet, who's been around for years with comic cartoons and his tools and stuff, and kind of on the tech side, he's one of those legends. So I
think he had his stuff online where you can just like use it, right? It's almost like that. What was that? The other guy named like Pepe or something like that, when he used to put rigs out and stuff for you to use.
So he had a bunch of tools and things. He had like the first post-based deformer, which helped with deformation and stuff like that, and that was all free to use. And but he was just a great guy, and you know, he's been at Pixar since Ant Bully, and was one of their, like, I don't even know what he does now, because I know
he's one of the full timers.
He's like doing modeling and stuff too of characters and things, and so it's very cool that I was fortunate enough to actually have that jump and have the availability of a mentor like that, because sometimes you find, you know, where you work, you wind up with, I guess, the, you know, people you don't even realize, like, you know, some people go into work and they're very into their stuff and they don't really
socialize
and network
there,
and really
like,
get to know people, what you can learn from them and what you could share with them.
Yeah.
And that's just something I've always done, is I'm always looking to learn, and that's how I've evolved so much over the years. But it's a key thing, like you kind of have to, even if you're the greatest animator ever, the way everything moves, like if you don't learn at least a bit of this or a bit that extra,
different techniques always help
into getting surpassed by how the industry moves.
And just keeping up with technology as a whole. That's awesome, man. So you went from the technical director at DNA to LucasArts, character technical director.
So now I went over to LucasArts, and when I joined LucasArts,
and that's where we met. That's where we met.
That is where we met. Yeah. But when I joined, I was on their incubator team, and we were working on coming up with new IP on the Nintendo DS, because that was a cheaper way to kind of.
Oh, were you on Bill Mooney's team?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, nice. That's
so I was on that group, and then they kind of shut that group down for a bit to try to refigure it out. But a lot of the designs that we did still continued on, and they wound up doing, like, once they built up Team 3 again, or the incubator team,
that was the team
they wound up with like 1313, and a lot of those things came off of ideas we built up for a long time. But I went over to work on the Indiana Jones game that didn't come out, and doing that stuff, and then worked on Force Unleashed. And
I remember playtesting the Indiana Jones game. It was pretty fun. It was different. I mean, for it to be on a handheld, I was like, wow, this is pretty crazy.
But then but the one we were doing for PS3 and 360 at the time, I know there were some demos out where we had all the fancy physics stuff that was going on, and that was that's what we were starting to utilize, all of the DMM stuff, like the breakables and all that for Force Unleashed. So that's when I started diving in away from just rigging characters or something like that, and started working on tools that, like, more physics-based stuff, and even learning cinematics more and cameras, and by helping write cinematic tools and pipelines that we needed, because Force Unleashed had all these big cinematics, and that was, aside from doing Jimmy Neutron and Bully, like the video games I worked on prior, the cinematics were all just kind of in-game IGC stuff, so it was little cuts of some story, but it wasn't like these big cinematics, especially learning things like cinematography and cameras and lighting.
I think they were doing their cinematics like real time, right? That was the goal.
The goal was.
I don't think they were. We did a few renders. I remember going to some of the
there were only
meetings.
A few that had to be rendered because it was cutting between levels or locations. That wasn't a way to really load it. But for the most part, everything was running as real time as we could make it. That was also very technically challenging, but it was. it was a good place to be and learn more. And actually, that's where I met a lot of my longtime friends that, you know, still keep up with and have worked with again in other locations.
Yeah.
But yeah, a funny story with me going to LucasArts after DNA had shut down, or not DNA, but Big Sky. And I was trying to find a job again because I wound up moving to Dallas, or Irving, near Dallas, from Austin to go to DNA, because there were really a lot of places were shutting down at the time in Austin. Actually, had interviewed, and they're like, well, you know, your art is good, but what we're looking for is someone who could work at LucasArts. So then I turned around and went, kind of I'll show you, and went and got a job at LucasArts, right?
Nice.
So that's a fun thing I always keep in the back of my mind. I'm not like calling them up.
That challenge.
It's like, oh, I'm at LucasArts now, but
hey man, sometimes that's a great motivator.
Yeah.
People not giving you a shot, and you're like,
And
okay,
then-
well, let me change this a little bit.
Yeah, and just, you know, it's a lot of self-assurance in myself too, of,
Yeah.
you know, if I put my mind to it, I can make this happen, you know. And
Yeah, no, that's a good thing to know about yourself.
Yeah.
I like to also like do a retrospect. So going from level design to character technical director, I think you kind of found like, this is what I want to do. What are some of the things that you would have done or chosen to do that could have helped you prepare? Because you are a very, very self-taught person.
Yeah.
But what are some of the things that you would have been, if you look back at even the schooling and even the level design position? It sounds like you've had the whole jack of all trades. You got to learn a lot. You got to experience a lot, which is very uncommon. Like
Yeah.
when you first get hired on. But for the people who are in your similar situation, outside of what you've already discussed, like what were some of the things after looking back and retrospecting and being like, man, I wish I would have been able to dabble in this or this and this, that would have prepared you more for technical director, character technical director type work?
actually, for me, I think with where my transition's gone, especially being self-taught, like if I would have continued studying, you know, more advanced mathematics, linear algebra, like I could be way ahead of my game. I'm still where I'm at and doing a good job, but with stuff like machine learning and all this AI stuff coming down the pipe, and, you know, that's all crazy math that, you know, I have a basis in it, but I didn't keep up with it because I was doing art and wasn't really paying attention. And that's my biggest thing, is I wish I had, because I loved math all through school when I was taking it, and I was pretty good at it. I didn't. It went to the back of my mind.
It's like
I didn't
everybody
think
else.
about
Like you're
it.
like, I will never use this. We'll
When
never
will
go
I
past
use
this.
calculus?
Yeah.
How is an imaginary number?
But
Like
now
that.
you know calculus
Yeah.
is good to know if you're going into character
Yeah.
technical director
But
stuff.
especially linear algebra is the biggest.
Okay.
Because a lot of the algorithms around machine learning and neural networks and all that stuff is, you know, it's doing, you know, linear algebraic and calculus solving, just giant matrices and all that stuff. And I self-taught to get myself back up to a good spot with it, and I'm still even learning. I'm going online and, you know, taking online courses at night, and, you know, off of different programs like Udemy and some other ones that are really good resources, and going through those. So I just keep pushing, because, you know, I could probably do the job I do now for years to come, and it would still be the same job it is, but that's just not who I've been, and I'll keep learning. That's why I keep doing this, because
Yeah, I think this career is all about adapting and learning. And there's a certain point where you have to self-teach yourself stuff, or you're going to end up just, like you said, falling behind, or someone's going to come and outshine you, and then you're just like, it's going to be too late. You know,
especially because there's more resources of learning stuff
that are free.
And schools and stuff like that then people coming out of school are ahead of the game on you, even though you've got all this experience, if you don't keep up with that. Like, that's one thing I really learned, and I try to share a lot when, like, I go to GDC, things like that. I like to meet a lot of newer students or people coming in the industry, and that's the biggest thing I can tell them is always keep learning. Like, you can't stop. If you do, then you're either going to get unhappy in your job because you're not going to feel like you're going anywhere, but you can't the industry is constantly evolving, and it's evolving way faster now because computers are learning to do the basis of stuff.
I was going to ask you, like, what do you think about all these deep fakes, man? I mean, like, I think the last movie that just came out was Gemini Man, and they did, like, just a straight-up CG character, and it kind of bombed. But all these deep fakes coming out look so much better. Like these image deep fakes that are coming out look so much better than the traditional, let's make a 3D model of the face and then project his skin texture on it. Like, what are your thoughts on that, since that's kind of bridging into like what you do a little bit?
I see a strong usage for it, and I like where it's going, to be honest, because it does solve hard challenges that in a cheaper way. Like when I'm thinking about work, which is what I'm doing. It's my job. I'm doing work. I always have to remember that, it's not about me fulfilling my artist desires, but I'm fortunate to have a job that I love doing, because I don't always get to work on stuff I want to work on,
That's the price, man. That's the price you pay. As you move up that ladder, you just start to facilitate.
But it's not just that. It's like, even if I'm working on a game, it may not be a game I'm enjoying.
I see what
that's
you mean.
not like my art. That's not fulfilling my art because I'm making 20 AKs in a day or something, right? Like it's and so I do stuff at home to fulfill all that. Because in my day job, I'm not doing a lot of art in that sense, but I think with my programming and all of that, there's a beauty and art to it that I embrace and enjoy.
That's good. That helps keep the balance.
But I still am an artist at heart. I sit at home and I'll do sculpts in ZBrush, and I'll, still keep up with it and make sure I don't lose that, which was the core of where I started.
Yeah, I think ZBrush just had another update coming out that's going to be pretty massive with their texturing and stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited for that, and Substance and, stuff that I'm not actually using.
But you can see where it's going to take
but I know
the work.
I need to learn that, and I need to know what's going on there and what's the output, especially to do my job, because we're building pipelines and for scanning and textures and digital character creation and all of that, even props and clothing and a lot of that stuff. How do we incorporate these tools to where it still becomes an artist friendly pipeline, because nothing's ever just done out of the box. Like
you don't want anybody to pull a fast one over on you, like, oh, I'm going to need 4 weeks for this. No. I know what this program can do. You're getting 2 weeks, buddy.
There is that, but there is also, how to put it, there's always going to be art direction, right? So mocap, I'm a big motion capture guy. Done it for a long time. My actual first foray was at LucasArts on the Indiana Jones game. I started working with the ILM, motion capture team, and started learning what's going on there and how we could incorporate it in games, because we were hand keying everything at that point. And I was looking at Force Unleashed. It's big, animated, inhuman movement most of the time. With Indiana Jones, you're talking about a human man that runs and jumps like a human and sometimes can't make that leap, and and that's the best use of starting as a basis with motion capture. But with motion capture itself and scanning and all of that, there's still not 100% solution done, and I approach it that way. And some people approach it the other way, and they're like, no, eventually this is gonna take all the animators' jobs, and it's gonna be
I think in the beginning, that's what the mindset was. Everybody was like, it's going to take your job. And everybody's like, see, now you're not going to be able to do anything. You're going to school for this. And that never has turned out to be the case.
And
it actually made it where you're more in demand.
Yes, you're more in demand, but you're also getting your job done more efficiently.
Yeah, a lot faster, right? A lot faster. A better use of time, a better use of getting ideas out quicker.
Yes.
And then even if you proof out that idea, you can still go, okay, well, I like this, but I'm having to touch this so much, I'm going to just take the poses I want and just do it by hand.
And that happens a lot. And that's where it's a tool. And you should always embrace these things, as they're going to be tools to help you improve your job.
Yeah.
Right? So all the machine learning, all the deep fake stuff, to get back to that.
Yeah.
In the end, yes, it's going to look great for 80% of it.
So when do you think something like that's going to be incorporated into like a full production? Like right now, I think people are having fun, enthusiasts are having fun with it, but I do not believe it's been in a full production yet. But some of it looks really good. I think the ones that, I don't know the comedian's name, but he had the deep fake of, they did Arnold Schwarzenegger's face on him, and then they did.
What is his name?
It's not Bill Nader. Bill Nader.
It's Bill Hader.
Yeah,
Yes,
Bill Hader.
Hader.
Yeah.
No, that one was great. There was one recently where it was an impressionist, and he did the impressions, and through those sections they deep faked, really good deep fake.
That was the split screen one, right? Where they just had it on a scroll carousel at the bottom, and each person's face went through, and then they showed
it on his face because they were showing you what was being solved in the solver, and and it does show that they're advancing that technology really quickly, and it will be a great tool that's going to be more believable. It gets more into usage rights and licensing than all that is the bigger challenge across the board in that sense, because this actor wants to continue acting and get paid. They're and that's their job. It's just like an animator. They don't want to give up their job if they expect just mocap comes off the stage and goes right in the game, and we don't need animators anymore because it needs to be animated, it needs to be cleaned up, it needs to be cycled, it needs all that touch that makes it usable. And the actors themselves, they're an asset, and they know that, and which is good for them. But you have contracts, like once they start giving up that rights to their likeness usage and stuff, and then they start losing money, and it hurts them. Like well,
it could go the other way too. I mean, do you ever think we'll get to the point where, let's just say Jack Nicholson, right? We know from what they've told us, Jack Nicholson doesn't really work because he just has a hard time remembering lines, is what he came out and said one time. Yeah. And he doesn't want to put himself through that. He doesn't need to work. Yeah. But could you imagine, like, all the work that he's done, and they can do a very clean deep fake like they did for Jim Carrey on that female body? That one was the cleanest one.
You saw the Jim Carrey as
in
The Shining, right? Like,
oh yes, that too. But could you imagine people want to see Jack in something? Yeah. Could you imagine them doing it that way? But then he could still get paid for that. Instead of just saying, "Oh, we have all your images," and MGM or whoever owns all these pictures we're getting it from, we're not paying you.
I can see it definitely working that way. I actually worked on a Bring Someone Back from the Dead project, which was the Tupac hologram.
Yes.
Kind of was a big opening to that whole thing when I was with Digital Domain.
That's not the next one. That's not the next one. I'm a little early.
I
remember that because
that one, but
I saw that, and I saw the Stan Lee one, and there was another one that was done of this Chinese female performer. Yep. She was already passed. I don't know her name, and I don't want to butcher it.
Yes.
But there was a event coming up over in China, and so they did this for them, and they had like this flying dragon going around her and stuff. I was like, oh my god, this is crazy.
And they had like the Michael Jackson one. And they have a lot of those. I think there was. Who else did they do? They didn't. I think at some point I heard rumors of like Nate Dogg or something, and
I think that was supposed to happen. I didn't see that when I
didn't
was
ever
there.
see it happen. I don't know.
Yeah. Only saw the first three,
but that was kind of a Pandora's box when we did that one. That was new grounds, which was great to be part of,
and new hardware too. It wasn't like when you see it on TV or when you just see it. It's different when you're there in person with all the hardware. Yeah. You're kind of like, okay, I get it. It's really different.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of the old school magic technique.
Yeah, but it works. It works.
But it really worked, and we're happy with the output, and it's finding myself through my career in positions to get to work on things like that are also things that motivate me to just keep doing it. Like I want to do more cool stuff. How can I keep myself relevant to then be brought into a team to, okay, now we're going to figure out this whole new thing where we're going to figure out deepfake. Right?
Have you tried that yet? Have you actually challenged yourself with incorporating that into something that could be a future project, or
I haven't messed
not
with
yet?
The deepfake stuff yet. That's where I'm doing classes to actually learn machine learning and neural networks and all that stuff better before I just start using the tool. I want to actually know how it works.
Yeah, I've seen some tools that are like the machine learning stuff, but it's like 3D heads and 3D
Yeah.
data that's coming in, and all the faces all targeted and all their stuff, which seems a lot different than the deep fake. That's why I was kind of asking about it, because I know it falls in line with what you do.
A lot of the machine learning stuff is still working at a 2D level.
Yeah, that's true.
But then you have ways that you can then drive 3D data from that 2D information. That's where a lot of it's coming from, because the solver's working on 2D images. Because once you get into 3D training data, like it's the calculations and time to solve those big matrices and memory and just time become, n-dimensionally harder, right?
But I did notice that they were hand keying a lot of that stuff after the fact.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, because you're talking about, you brought up something before about like doing 1,000-something frames for the show you're on, but they're doing like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of frames, because the machine learning can just spit out those frames like
so a lot of
crazy.
What the work there is to make it better is you're giving it kind of target frames. So you're going to a frame where it's starting to slip, and it's just like if you're doing old school match moving or something, over time that pixel may get blurry or something, and your job is to go click it back. Your
jaw
on
starts
that
to
pixel,
go. Okay, let's fix that.
And that's where a lot of match movers, stuff like that. That's the role they're playing, is that it's still not 100% solution. No. It's not magically perfect, and I don't think it ever will be. No. There will always be need to know those things. It may not be a full-time job, but it will be a job that,
Not until a robot makes it, because then there won't be no user error.
The robot's job is to go back and click the dot.
Yeah, right.
Remember when you used to have to go move this tracker back in place?
Oh my God.
Now the robot does it.
Oh my God. So that's awesome, dude. I think that would be cool. I mean, you never know. That first, you got to think about it. The savings you're going to have if you do deepfakes on movies or games or whatever, dude, that's going to make a huge difference. Yep. And you're going to start seeing that bloat that there is now. I think, man, I can't remember the movie. Terminator. It was the new Terminator that came out.
Just 100.
I haven't seen it either. I don't have any spoilers. But I was reading that they didn't make anywhere near back as much money they spent on that film. They spent a lot of money on that film.
And that's where it gets into, especially if you do like Gemini Man, right? Where you do this full digital character. For one, that's one of the hardest problems to solve, which we're getting better solutions, but it's still not solved, right? Like it's, even with like the deepfake stuff, yes, it's believable to a point, but it's still, you can see it, right?
I mean, they had a lot of...
there's some really good ones, definitely,
but
it's like on the ideal video and on the ideal, everything is ideal, and you don't always have ideal as much as you try.
I mean, they had a lot of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reference they could have used for the younger version of him. I mean, they probably would have had that Superman mistake would have had to take the mustache out and stuff, but... Man, I don't know. There's always something when they try to make it so, that uncanny valley, they're always trying to make it so realistic where you're like, the mouth doesn't look right, or the face isn't looking right. The textures look great. Everything looks great in still form.
That's why it's the hardest problem, is because as humans...
You can see it.
We pick up on when it's wrong very quickly. That's why it's the uncanny valley, is because, you don't want to land in it, which means that you just kind of... are in the creepy zone. And, in a lot of games I've worked on over the years, like, you wind up purposefully making sure you land on this side.
On either side of it,
right?
Not right in it.
When you land in it, that's when stuff is weird and it looks bad.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it's just technology, it's time, cost, If you had more time and more money to put at it, that's why some of these films cost so much money, is because it's really expensive to get it even to a level where it's passable throughout the film, and then you're doing it over a 90-minute film. It's a hard problem.
Yeah.
I've worked on that problem for years and years, and it's, it really requires a lot. And, and that's where these things where they're able to learn this information and help feed you to get you further faster. It's a tool. I'm always welcoming a lot of new tools, and it's the same thing that's going on now with all the AI and the machine learning and everything. It's people getting back to we're going to lose our job. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I look at this, just the same thing when motion capture happened, which I think was one of the there were several big shifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you had stuff where you went from everything's text-based to a programmer has to make the art for this game to, we can do 2D sprites and an artist can paint it. And that was a big shift in the industry. And then we went from 2D to 3D. That was a huge shift, and that actually, some people survived, some people didn't.
Low poly 3D at that,
Yeah.
not even the high stuff yet.
Yeah. And then you started getting into better GPUs and graphics and consoles that could, render realistic lighting and stuff. And, there's been a lot of big shifts and very key moments, and a lot of those, but the big ones that have always been scary, I'm going to lose my job is, there's a few of those that have happened. And,
Yeah.
And mocap was one. And then now we're getting in the AI and, and when I talk with people, because I've had those conversations, especially I go to GDC or something and everyone's sitting around getting some drinks and we get into that stuff. I have a good buddy of mine that's a technical animator he and I really get into it, on those discussions, and those are great. We actually tried to do a panel on it once, but I didn't get to make it. I think they still did the panel or a podcast, but I wasn't able to make it. I was like, because I was working. But that would have been a lot of fun. But I'm welcoming to those, because it's just going to be another tool to make me more efficient.
Yeah. That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. That's good to hear. So you went from LucasArts or Lucasfilm to Factor 5, and you went there. You were there for 8 months, but you went there as the senior technical director and then into principal. What are the differences between those two roles?
So technical director really isn't a particular craft director, so it's more of a generalist TD in that sense. So I'm overlooking,
because you have to help so many
tools for
disciplines.
animation, tools
Right.
for rigging, tools for just exporting assets into game, and more pipeline work. Like character TD is of course doing rigging and muscle simulations and cloth sims and everything related to character technical work. But in those senses you have even variations to that. So like a lot of times people use, I'm a creature rigger, right? And a lot of that time you're not doing like big picture, right? You're like, here's a character, I'm gonna rig it, paint with skin weights, I'm gonna make this move and function and apply muscles and stuff. And then when you get into like kind of the technical director realm of it, you're sitting there writing tools and writing muscle simulators and writing, the bigger tool sets rather than spending more time on the actual asset work. But when I went over to Factor 5, joined as a senior technical director, and I was doing a lot of rigging and stuff, but it was focused on pipeline. And then when I went to principal technical director, that was being bumped up as a studio technical director. So out of all the TDs and technical artists and all that stuff, I was their manager across all the projects. The reason it was so short was they did shut down. That was a whole thing. I won't go into all that, but it shut down, and during that time we were working on we were working with Image Movers Digital, which is the next job I wound up getting.
Well, I want to ask not so much about this job, but on these roles, so how much did your day-to-day change from being senior technical director, where you were saying like you worked on some of the work, but then making tools so you could automate that process a little bit? When you went to principal, what changed? Did anything change from the day-to-day of those two roles, or is it just
they did
more responsibility? And that's
the big change was less actually doing it and more looking at what needs to be done.
So the future
and
forward
laying
thinking.
out the future.
Okay.
And of where we need to go in all of our development and our pipelines, because new consoles are coming. I've got to pay attention to that and start prepping and planning out like what are we going to do to handle moving to the new console while we're still making the current console. And so you wind up, your focus isn't on, I got to get this script written so that they can auto build controls on this rig. I've got to look at, I need a new modular pipeline for rigging You know, and if it's going to support being able to do more data, we then got to look at the core of it, what can be reused, what needs to be rewritten, organized, setting up development environments for big tools and big tool sets.
Okay.
So it's a bigger picture at that point.
Right.
Because what I'm looking at is, for one, how can we share tech across the different games? Because we had 4 titles at that time in the studio, plus some other, you know, looking at new IP and where to go for the company for future and stuff like that. So that was a big jump.
Yeah. So it sounds a lot different.
Yeah.
So that means you worked a lot at home to fulfill your joy of
Lots
what
of
you
emails,
like to do.
lots
Yeah.
of PowerPoints, lots of planning, lots of code review, just going through and digging into what all's actually there and validating. Are these tools still valid?
Yeah.
Are they even used anymore?
Did you do a lot of hiring, or was it just using and utilizing who was already there? Like
I
once
did
you got the
I did
bump.
hiring as well, but that didn't last very long.
Yeah,
I felt bad about some of the hires I made that then 3 months later we had to shut down, but that's the industry. You know, the only job that I actually left and didn't go down with the ship over the career so far, even up to Factor 5, was LucasArts, and that's because I got an opportunity to have a big advance to go to Factor 5.
Right.
But that was the first time I actually ever put in here's my 2 weeks notice, I'm going to another job. The reason I had 6 credits on Ambly is because I was able to fulfill those roles and jump to the next spot until the film was finished.
Yeah.
And that's when they were shutting down too at the end of the production, to where they actually had done big layoffs before we had actually finished the film, because they were laying off who they couldn't.
Yeah, and that's still very common, even in the film industry. Like people, everything's contract based now
I was
because
able
of
to
that.
stay on and move to this next role that was needed down the pipe.
Yeah.
Because fortunately, I'm a person that can kind of pick up things quickly and jump in and help out, and because it's less about knowing that particular thing and knowing how that thing works.
Yeah.
So that you can get in and the understanding and making sure I'm learning. Like when I was doing modeling, I could have just focused on the modeling, but I was talking to the guys in texture and seeing how they were doing textures, and talking to the lighters, and they got this tool Nuke, and I was playing around with that with compositing, and you know, I tinker.
All those things have come full circle too. That software,
Yes,
like Houdini and Nuke and all, they're all getting integrated more into the development process of video games.
Even
as before, it was more like film commercials. We need a quick effect or something made, but now
very focused on VFX, like Houdini.
Yeah.
But they're
for that proceduralness that gives you for like level building or everything.
Well, the big thing, having jumped back and forth between the different industries, like we're getting to a point where the work is the same. The output is just the difference. You know, it's like we're still rendering frames. We're just doing it real time. Yeah. And now it's coming back around in VFX and stuff where they're using game engines to actually render full frames at a faster rate and can get the same quality that they like. You know, I think it was 3 scenes in Rogue One were rendered in Unreal.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about too much of that post, because you can be like, oh, the engine can render it. We don't have to like layer it on too much.
But
other than for lighting and compositing.
It's also faster feedback, right?
Yeah.
Like usually, like you're doing lighting and stuff, then you got to send it off to render, and you're talking 17 hours for this, for all these layers. You got to come back together. You get a faster feedback. I mean, when they did the Rogue One stuff, you know, having talked with a lot of the people, you know, it wasn't 60 frames a second. It was a minute a frame, but that's a huge,
you can see mistakes faster.
Cost savings. Yeah. And you can iterate much faster.
Yeah.
Because you have to iterate a lot. And when you're doing these things, it's like, just a little bit more through this section because of the rim. We like the nose thing.
Yeah.
You can see that much sooner.
Something like that after the fact in the old school way would cost a lot of money, a lot of time,
it's
instead of being like, let's save this as another iteration.
Yeah.
Rotate that 30 degrees, please. Let's see what that looks like.
The thing is, with even the films they're spending all this money on, they're actually utilizing the stuff that made it cheaper, but now they're just putting more of it.
Yeah.
And so they still spend the same amount of money, but they get more.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think it's from my experience, it's one of those things like where it's like, hey, you get this amount of money. If you don't use it, you are going to lose it. And when they do the next feature, you're gonna get what the lower amount was. Yes. So I think there's a little bit of that going on too.
There's some of that, and there's also tax, rebates and things like that for shooting in certain places where you actually spend this money and you want to spend more because you get 50% of it back or whatever the incentives are in that for that film. So they spend that $300 million knowing they're going to get $150 million back or whatever.
We're taking the whole team. Yeah, we're all going.
well, those you have to hire a certain percentage in that because it brings jobs, right?
Yeah.
And so they bring you there so that then you hire local talent as part of that.
Yeah.
Which I learned much later after working on teams that we flew around to do that, and was like, why don't we just bring our guys? And they're like, because we can't. We got to hire. We have to hire local.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. So you went from Factor 5, principal technical director, to mocap technical director. So what? And Image Movers Digital is still around. So what? They're not around anymore.
Image Movers is around.
Okay.
Image Movers Digital.
Was that a subgroup of that?
It was
company?
Robert Zemeckis' company. He opened with Disney to do his motion capture films.
Okay.
Where previously he used Sony ImageWorks.
Yeah.
Was it ImageWorks or
Image Movers?
The Sony Pictures Image Movers, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't work with them, but he always used them to do the films when he did like Beowulf and
Gotcha.
and Monster House and
it's like
what was it, Polar Express and all those films, and he just wanted to have
it's like James Cameron with Lightstorm. He has his own studio to do stuff. So
this was Robert Zemeckis' one, and we did Christmas Carol and Marzine's Moms, which that was the shift into mocap. So I got kind of the mocap bug at LucasArts before I went to Factor 5, but while at Factor 5. At the time, Image Moves Digital was testing with different companies to use a game engine as their real-time preview on the stage.
Do you remember what it was at the time?
What
the engine that they were looking at?
They were talking to Factor 5 about using ours. That's how I got the foot in the door talking to them.
Okay.
And when Factor 5 shut down, we were still in testing mode with them, and then all that happened. And then they hired me.
Gotcha. Oh, so they knew you already because they were using
because I had that foot in the door.
Oh, man, that's nice.
Probably would have had more issues in between there of getting a job.
Networking 101.
With them, it was networking 101.
That's good. Could you imagine like having a bad? They came down to the studio to look at the engine. And you're like, oh man, these guys aren't getting it. Blah. And now next thing you know, it's like, you guys looking to hire someone?
Yeah,
that's good. That's good that it went well, man.
And I had a friend there that I'd never worked with, but I'd met him years before in Austin, and it just came roundabout. It just
that's awesome.
There's a lot of that. You never know when someone you're working with is gonna come back around, right?
Yeah,
because this industry is very big, but it's a very small industry.
It's very small once you start it's getting out there and working with people.
And the network's small, even though it's really big, and there's a lot of work, and there's lots of people I've never met or worked with in the industry, but there's always a chance
that
two or three
that
every
net
company
of the
you
network
go to is going to be there.
It branches out, and I think you can see that when you're on LinkedIn, when you're like, man, this guy knows this guy, and then you're like third level down, you're like, oh, he knows all these people. Wow, that's crazy. So but here you are working on creation of scripts and tools to aid in solving the motion capture data. Was there anything that you can remember where you're like, oh, this was like a nice shining moment for you? Because you've already touched mocap before, you said, and this was like a different.
So of course, when I was at LucasArts, it was just human stuff. Christmas Carol was a lot of human work. I didn't come in at the beginning of that. I came in partway through and stepped in, and that was really my foray into really learning motion capture and the process of turning the captured data into animation.
Oh, okay. I was just getting ready to ask, what do you mean by that when you say really learning it?
And so learning things like solvers and motion builder versus using PillSolve, which is another plugin that mocap solver, which I love to death, but it's and it was a new learning experience. The tools, they hired me because they knew I could do the tools, but the what I was writing the tools for was a new experience for me. But it was still taking my experience, being able to write tools, scripts, pipeline, and all that I taught myself over the years, and apply it to this role. And so that got me into the motion capture side, which now I've done since, I guess, 2009.
Have you worked on like the facial motion capture stuff too as well?
Yes.
Or is that later? Was that at this point or was that later down the line?
So on Marzi's Moms, I helped with some of that. And that's when I started learning like FACS, or the facial action coding system, which is now becoming kind of a standard for doing face rigs, because it's a universal language. It's a really well-defined universal language, which makes it apply when you're doing anything.
There's certain
right?
defined poses and things you need to create.
A lot of that. The shining moment there was, so with Marzi's Moms, we had crazy characters, right? Like the aliens were a big challenge. We're trying to figure out how we're going to do this and not spend millions on animators having to tweak a lot of data. And so a big part of my job with my buddy there was figuring out how we're going to solve mocap to these aliens that, their torsos were tiny, not human length, and their legs were really long, and then they actually had like multifaceted limbs. So they had the standard animal kind of insect extra haunch, or whatever you want to call it.
That hind leg.
That extra bend, like mid shin break kind of extra joint, basically. But they also still had full ankle ball toe, like a human, in the sense that foot shape wasn't human, but the bone structure was this mixture of an animal leg plus a human foot system. Right. A little more like a horse, but still one extra joint to deal with. And then the arms were real long, so that they were very non-human proportionate. And that was a big, hard challenge. And the day that I kind of gave the first showing to the VFX soup and all of them, it was, we got to show them, okay, we figured this out, and look how far we can take it just at the mocap level after all this work, and trying to figure it out, because they're really worried there's going to be lots of hands-on fixing for these characters. And there was scenes in the film where it was using massive and crowd stems. It was full feature with aliens there constantly, and lots of them. We had scenes with like 18 alien main characters that pile up, and it's like they were there a lot, so it was going to be very expensive if we couldn't figure out how to do that. And then once I got to show, like, here's just straight mocap through the solving pipeline, this is how it looks before it goes to animation, and have the VFX soup and them like buy me shots that night and go, you saved the film.
That's awesome.
To have someone say something like that is like, that's
awesome. So did you guys use like, because I know you have to be really creative once you start capturing stuff on a stage, if you have creatures and stuff involved. Like, did you guys use like a lot of stilts or something to like make the arms larger? I saw a few things where
we didn't do that. We did a little bit of maybe extra padding because they had really wide hips.
Okay.
But we still didn't like go to the realm that they've started doing, which which you've seen, like maybe Beauty and the Beast behind the scenes, and he's got the crazy, mocap suit, but he's like padded out to.
Yeah, I think the big one was how they did the Planet of the Apes movies, where they had those huge arm stilt things that had the mocap tags.
Some projects that they use those for other creatures in that sense.
That's pretty cool.
And,
it like proportionalizes a human figure where the hips would be where a gorilla's hips would be if they were just scaled up a little bit more, because those things made your arms a lot longer. Yeah, and that's pretty cool.
And in that sense, that's when I started learning what I like to still refer to as the art of retargeting.
Yeah.
Which, a lot of people don't understand how it gets to the animation side on the character. And there's a real art to taking it from a human to something non-human. Even just human to human at times, especially in video games, you wind up with, you have to use a single skeleton for every character but then they shoot with 30 different people that are all different proportions, different everything, and you have to retarget that animation data.
Yeah.
And it's not doesn't just plop on. And
well, it's changed now. I know in Unreal, like you can retarget pretty quick. I think they've started integrating that into their pipeline.
But it's not about the ability to go, retarget it. It's the ability to maintain that essence of what the performance is.
Yes.
No matter what the target is, and it really takes a lot of subjective, viewing and looking at it and knowing what to look for, knowing problems that will arise. So you have to know, like, how's the solver work? How's the tool set that I have to use? How does it work underneath that I can hack the system in that way, right? To get out of it what it really needs. Because there's stuff like the deepfake and things like that that are automated, but it's what will always be there is the art direction and that subjective view to get it to look like what you want it to look, or the art director wants it to look. Because you can just take it and go, here's some mocap, but it doesn't mean it's going to be good.
Right.
And so there's that big step between capturing the data. There's lots of art pieces to this, which is how to build the stage and make it nice and capture the data, especially face data and all of that. And then the systems usually, there's a lot of automation stuff there, a lot of data cleanup and stuff to get just the data out of it. And then there's that retargeting it to the end result. It's even with props and stuff, you got to build the prop physically so that it works out and make sure that you're getting a proper representation, or else the hands aren't going to be on it. Or there's a lot of things that are all retargeting in that sense. But
now
doing something like taking a human and how do you make this human on these stilts be a believable ape? Because it's still something people know, and you're viewing it, and they did a great job making it feel like it's an ape.
Yeah.
That just has this human essence to them rather than, that's a guy in a suit. And, it's like...
Hey, they did a great job on Planet of the Apes, though, man.
Yeah.
That looks amazing.
And that's that art of retargeting.
I was going to ask you, you're talking about building out sets. Do you get to lay your hands on that process as well? Because that does affect mocapping and even the capturing of the mocap.
Yeah, I did some of that at Digital Domain, a lot of it at Digital Domain. Mm-hmm. So basically what happened there was we finished up Marzine's Moms, and then Image Movers shut down. Image Movers Digital shut down. But they had built this amazing motion capture stage and facility down in Playa
People
Vista.
were always using it, like they don't go in there.
And so when they shut down, that's when I took a role over at Naughty Dog. So my first stint at Naughty Dog, worked there twice.
Yeah. Wait. Okay, this first time, because I really love Naughty Dog products as much many gamers do. Was this the time when you got to touch their great games they're known for, or was this not a time? Because I know you went there twice.
Uncharted 3, and the beginning of Last of Us.
Okay. At this point, they were already working on those projects.
Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah, because they were in production for almost 5 years. I think
they had just shipped Last of Us 2, or Uncharted 2.
Okay.
And we're rolling in Uncharted 3, so I came in on that, and then we were developing Last of Us.
Congratulations, man. Those are great games. Those are great games to be a part of, dude.
That. But what happened was Digital Domain bought the Image Movers Digital mocap facility.
Is that the one that's next door to where they are now?
It is the one where they are now in Playa Vista.
Yeah.
That was the mocap facility. They moved everything from Venice into there and actually built it out and turned it from this huge mocap facility into... has the motion capture there, but it's their actual house
that's where I was
at
when I was there. Yeah.
Oh, you were there too.
Yeah.
Surprised we didn't.
No, it was different times. It was different times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got there when they were at that facility.
Yeah. So they called me up and hired me back to come help get the stage back up and running.
Yeah.
And then I actually did. There is when I spent. Excuse me. Sorry.
You're all right. You want some water?
Yeah,
some water?
we grab a little water here.
Yeah, man.
At that point was when in the motion capture realm, that's when I started learning more of the on-set stuff.
Okay.
When I worked at IMT, it was post. So
Oh,
not
okay.
on the
Yeah,
stage.
that's
I
different.
started helping, with putting on markers and face markers and learning face mocap and that process, but I wasn't doing a lot on the set. It was all behind the scenes
Right.
and the post work. Once I captured it, came to us, we did the solving, retargeting, and all of that. But at Digital Domain, I was on the set and learned how to build the mocap stage and learn the cameras and
Yeah.
really get the whole thing
Yeah.
while still also writing tools and pipeline and all of that. So that wasn't a specific role. It was just, we have a mocap stage, we're gonna make mocap, we're gonna do it. And
Yeah.
we did like 30 something projects.
Yeah, I think that was their meat and potatoes once they moved to that area.
Yeah.
Of all the projects coming in, it was to do the mocap work, or someone renting the stage to do their mocap work there. So
And so I learned kind of the whole business of mocap,
yeah,
like very extensively and more detailed.
that's
While
awesome.
I was learning bits and pieces over the years, I wasn't learning it as much as I did there because I wasn't doing it every day.
Yeah,
I didn't put in my 10,000 hours till then.
yeah.
Right? And so now, and I love mocap and we'll probably do it for a long time. But with being in the group I'm in now, it's not just motion capture. Like I said, it's any real world acquisition, right? So if we're doing scanning or we're doing
It's everything
any
that's
of
related to
stuff
that.
of taking and digitizing real world stuff,
Yeah,
which is how you kind of look at motion capture. That's what the
Yeah.
core of it is. Yeah.
that's awesome. So you're saying this time at Naughty Dog, you were only there to help facilitate and help them get things back in order?
No,
At
at
this
Naughty
point?
Dog, I worked as a character TD
Okay.
doing rigging on Uncharted 3 and
Okay.
and some of the preliminary pipeline prep. But then Digital Domain called me, and so I had the mocap bug. So I went back to Digital Domain and stood up the stage and
Gotcha. So it's this part right
spent
here.
2 years there.
Okay.
It says a year and 11 months, but I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
I think
So-
I don't think it has the right dates in there. But yeah,
So when you went to Naughty Dog, was this when you did your? Because I remember you had that talk at GDC. Was this
it
when you did the
was
talk, or was the
after
next
Digital
one?
Domain. On my
Okay.
second stint, I went back as a mocap TD.
Okay.
Because they had done mocap since Uncharted and kept pushing on the mocap side as a tool set.
Well, let's go back. Let's go back real quick. I don't want to
Yeah.
jump ahead. There's a
Okay.
lot of good stuff here. So we already know you went through the character, technical director, mocap technical, but here you went through as a lead solver. What do you do as a solver? And for people that don't know what that is,
So
like what is a solver?
Solving is the pieces of taking mocap data and digitizing it to animation data and then retargeting on the characters. So there's two phases of solving, because the retargeting, you're also solving this skeleton onto that skeleton, but then you're also at the core of what solving is once you capture all the marker cloud, you're kind of fitting the skeleton and applying constraints that then it solves, mathematically how to move that skeleton to keep its
Keep the
relationship
limitations
to
and
all the
rotations
markers,
together. Yeah.
And so that's the solving piece. But then I was working on all the mocap pipeline,
Yeah.
which led me to, getting into being a mocap TD or technical director.
So senior mocap pipeline engineer. What the engineer being on there is kind of throwing me off. So what's the difference between that and being the technical director?
The technical director is usually, in most places, is the lead engineer.
Okay.
I wasn't the lead engineer, but I was the lead solver for all the post mocap work.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
I was a mocap pipeline engineer, which for that I was writing all pipeline tools and started
Yeah.
my foray of less of just focused on solving mocap and working on tools on, how we track markers and how we.
So were
do
you
a lot of
there?
that.
Did you help them build out what this stage is today?
Mhm.
Like with all the that cage with the cameras, and then the VCam setup that they have today?
I worked on an old version.
Okay.
When I left, they had hired in another guy into my role who then started focusing more on their VR
Gotcha.
stuff that
Yeah.
it went to. We were experimenting at the time with it, but it wasn't like part of our production. So when I left was right at the rollout of rolling into Jungle Book and
Yeah, they
and
still show that
Teenage
there
Ninja
as like
Turtles
a
and stuff. Yeah.
premiere piece
So
when
I
they
was
do
at the
the
beginning of that,
walkthroughs.
and then when I left, that was when they had the whole shift from Digital Domain 2.0 to the bankruptcy to 3.0.
Yes, the
I
rebuilding.
literally,
of it.
my last day was before they announced bankruptcy the following Tuesday. It was a Labor Day weekend. That was my last day
Yeah.
because Naughty Dog called me up and go, "Hey, you're doing mocap now. We want to bring our mocap in house and have a lot more insight into it and control on it."
Right.
And so they called me up because that's what I was doing over at Digital Domain and had me come back, which I had loved working at Naughty Dog and the projects. And so I was like, yeah. And
Yeah.
it was at the point where they were going through some problems at Digital Domain. So I was kind of, it was right, perfect timing.
Because they're, I mean, obviously they're owned by Sony, so they have access to the Sony stage, like
Yeah,
all the time, right?
we
So-
utilized it. I wasn't
Yeah.
shooting the mocap. I was
Oh,
I was coming in and owning the solving retargeting pipeline
right.
so that
So that they could go shoot the
So they
mocap
could
and it
get
could
it
be smooth.
as fast as they want or prioritize it
Right.
easier how they want, because they were using Sony's VASG group, which is kind of their central group like our EA Create. And so they're tied to also other productions, and and they wanted to have this like super tool.
So for when you were at Naughty Dog the second time, so I do have questions about the rigging, because I remember you guys came out and shared everything you did on that project, where you had like I think 3 different types of rig layouts or skeletal layouts on top of Nathan Drake.
Yeah.
And you guys were like you had the mocap pass, and then that was helping drive, but influenced also by another pass for like the procedural stuff, and then another pass for like what you want to do, the hand count, and then you blended it all together. So like, were you a part of developing that? Did you develop that, or was that something that you helped that was already going on when you got there?
I took on working on that after Judd Smantoff, who wrote it originally for Uncharted 2, I think, was when he kind of developed that mocap skeleton driving the rig live and giving you this layer before Maya had layers, right? Is the design of that. And they still use it to this day because it's a great way to have a rig. And it does actually simplify a lot of stuff of retargeting that animation data onto the animation rig controls. We had written a new version of that right before I left. That was working on Last of Us 2 and Lost Legacy when I left.
And that was all proprietary, right? Like that's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all Maya stuff, and
Okay.
and it's just utilizing a lot of stuff and some custom plugins and things like that. But driving it all just it's in Maya, and there was a lot of just using nodes and this and that. But there were custom plugins developed to identify and transfer information from just a base skeleton to animation controls that are IK/FK switching. And how do you, if you want, you can say, hey, I want it all FK arms for this section of animation, and it bakes it over to the controls, and then you can layer animation on top of that. It's a great design. It's still a design I kind of write my own versions of anyways in that sense, because it's a great way to utilize mocap and an animator friendly control rig without using like the human IK rig or the
Yes,
something that's very built
definitely
around.
don't use human IK rig.
The human IK rig
It has a purpose,
has
but
its
it's not
purpose,
for
and
like
it is for editing
production.
mocap, but it's
Yeah.
not for helping get you to that artistic
Yes.
level, right?
That's correct.
I've seen some people that swear by it that also are very great hand animators too, but it lacks all the extra features if you want to layer stuff on it that's not part of the performance that you captured.
What are some of the most difficult things that you had to go through when you guys were coming up with that, 3 skeletal layout, like that you had to overcome?
The biggest thing is in mocap and human movement, people hyperextend, and just a simple IK arm rig doesn't. Right? So you're having to try
It won't even
to
let you, like it
that
right out the
IK
box with IK.
flips because it's
Yeah.
designed. Some of that is by developing one kind of prejudging to where you're actually changing the pole vector and information and preferred angle on like the joints so that it will hyperextend with that same IK chain. You just are basically flipping the pole vector direction so the arm doesn't flip, but you hold it and it does hyperextend. But the trickier part with that is if you don't want to have that because you have like runtime IK that can't do that or something like that, which you wind up with all the climbing and all that stuff we did they did through the whole Uncharted series. You've got to design the rig, and that was part of my retargeting rig, was how to not destroy the data and get that performance onto the animation rig or onto the mocap skeleton and actually remove that hyperextensions and things that the body's actually doing that we can't actually use in the game. Stuff like even in humans, like all your joints, they flex and stretch by centimeters. Some of them by 2 to 3 centimeters, like your shoulder area, the whole section, if you pull on it, it'll, your arm's now 6 centimeters longer across the board, and you don't usually have translation data in your joints in the game. And that's part of that art of retargeting, is how to pull that off. With the animation rigs, it's then how to retarget it onto a control rig. That's another art of retargeting, where it's not, you're taking the same base skeleton, but you're now driving things like IKFK switching and can't have hyperextensions and can't, as locked to a single axis, which, a human can bend their elbow in multiple directions.
Flexes.
And flexes. And then IK also doesn't like multi-axis in the middle, but being able to have both. Those are the bigger challenges, is how to keep the performance that you're spending all this money capturing and turning into data as motion capture, and then still having an animator-friendly rig that the animators want to use and can then also do their artistic passes.
That's awesome.
So those challenges are hard on any rig when you build it, and the best thing with that is to work closely with the animators, especially as a character TD or rigging TD. You work closely with the animators and make a tool they want to use.
Well, I know that changed a lot for the industry, like when you guys shared all the information, like how people just developed things. The next thing that you guys did that shed some light on it was your facial setup that you have for Ellie and Joel.
Yeah.
That was like breathtaking. Was a lot of that mocap hand keyed? I know there was some discussions and articles where they were saying like they had all those joints in there so they can hand key what they needed for certain parts, but then there were other parts that were most likely
well, we didn't do facial mocap till Uncharted 4.
Okay.
And that was a lot of me convincing Amy and the animators that it's yet another tool that they can use. Like, it took a long time for them to shift off of hand keying to using.
Well, it's a little scary too,
right?
when you do.
Scary, yeah.
When you even talk about facial mocap, it's a little scary because now you're just, like you said, opening this Pandora's box of like, you're gonna get what you're gonna get, and then it's gonna be painful to try to fix it.
Yeah,
so.
But that's where things like animation layers, all those extra tools that were coming into Maya at the time to help with that, because in mocap data you've got baked animation. There's no nice curve from here to there, although there's some new stuff coming out that I've seen some papers about that I want to try to see if I can implement and write. That's that's taking like dense animation curves and actually losslessly converting them into controllable animation curves that you'd want, even like 2 poses, right? Like, so if you wanted to say, I want an actual whole body pose for every 10, minimum 10 frame space, and have it still keep all the stuff in between. There's tools and papers I've seen where they're doing that stuff to an extent. I haven't seen like it used in production yet, but I'd like to actually take and write it. And
it's actually gotten not too bad in Maya if you do like your Euler filter first to make sure you're not getting any weird flipping, or like that hitching that happens. But then the curve editor, when you use that, it's pretty good. Like.
It handles it much better.
It does. In the beginning,
did a big
it
speed
didn't.
improvement in 2019 latest as well.
Yeah.
That for the dense data because they did the shift, I think, in 2017 to the new animation curve editor, and it got kind of chuggy.
Yeah. Yeah, it used to not work well at all. Like, you would just be like, oh, this looks nothing like, you just have to revert or undo what you just did because you're like, it doesn't even look like the performance anymore because it was
the
just doing math.
And stuff
Yeah, it was just going, okay, every couple frames, delete, 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 as opposed to actually looking what the curve's doing and then trying to preserve, high points, low points.
How can the tangents be tweaked so that you hit that proper curve and all that? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's actually some new filters in there that I think like a new Butterworth filter and another filter for anim curves for mocap data.
Yeah.
That I helped introduce that to be put in there at one point.
Is Motion Builder, I want to ask, is Motion Builder a huge part of your pipeline? Or do you have something else from out of your 3D package going into getting what you want by either stitching things together?
Yeah, so at Naughty Dog we use Maya.
Okay.
Like, there wasn't really any Motion Builder usage, as much as I would have liked to have added to the tool. And some animators
you would preferred it
to first do what I like to call motion editing, right? Which is, and there are people that are very defined as motion editors versus animators, and Weta has that distinction too, where their job is to take the mocap and keep it and do all the tweaks that you need to do to get it back to that performance, right? There's some artistic there, but the artistic is around looking at the footage and making sure the hand's placed on the table
it's like
and
stitching, foot
and
plants.
So you're really trying to bring the data to closer to the performance, because it's never a full 100% thing, especially when you're doing retargeting from like a human to an ape or some weird creature with like multiple leg joints and stuff like that. Those are challenges, and you can get it so far, but there's just no way mathematically to solve it all out, right? And that's where a motion editor comes in, and they're taking that data, but now Maya has human IK and stuff in there too, so it's a bit easier to just do it in Maya too now, because without shifting packages. But Motion Builder was built for motion capture editing, like the whole tool, and
that's all a part of the Autodesk family of stuff now too. So,
but like at Naughty Dog we didn't use it.
That's good to know.
And being in the central group now, we work with all the game teams in EA, right? So we use Motion Builder in our pipeline to do retargeting and stuff, but it's not necessarily, but like face solving and stuff we're using in Maya, and we're jumping around through tools, but it comes down to the game teams too. Some of them are like exclusive Motion Builders, some are like Maya all the way, some the usage in our pipeline is Motion Builder for pieces of it, but we have custom scripts and we have all kinds of stuff that we're doing before it even goes to 3D land, and it's there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline for that. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's pretty cool. So after Naughty Dog, you went to DICE.
Yes.
Working on. So you were there for a year.
So DICE is EA.
Yes, DICE is EA. Scanning, rigging, animation. What? DICE put out a lot of like a FPS type
Battlefield.
Games. Yeah.
So
is that what
when
you
I went
worked
there?
on?
It was for a game that wound up being canceled.
Okay.
And so at the time, the big reason for leaving Naughty Dog, loved the projects, loved the company, loved the work, but I was tired.
I was surprised, man, when I saw that you left. I was like, what? Why? Like, cause
and it's just the industry. There's crunch, and there's lots of it. And,
yes, they definitely have crunch.
At my age now, I'm in my 40s, and I've done this 29 years now. So it was just one of those. I had to think of my health.
Let's talk about that, man. So, crunch. Like, I know a lot of teams now, a lot of studios now, and we even see it with projects that are coming out, are getting pushed back because they're like, hey, we don't want to crunch the team. We're going to delay our release for like a year or so we can make sure we get everything done. But, crunch is still very, very existing in the GTA family, like Red Dead, they crunch a lot, but they crunch a lot and then end up letting go of their teams.
Yeah.
But when it comes to crunch, like, what are some of the things that, other than staying there late and supporting and all that stuff, like, do you feel crunch is unnecessary, or do you think crunch has a place, or do you think crunch is just the means of poor planning?
I think crunch, when you talk about crunch, I see there's some different varying realms of overtime. And there's some overtime that if you really have the passion, that last few weeks, you're going to have some overtime. And I just see it as overtime. Like the last few weeks of production to get that thing out the door and get that extra oomph and cherry on top and make sure that it is a product you're happy with.
Because you already know you got a gym and you're like, ooh, let's polish this.
But this could be, and
Yeah.
you're doing this polish.
Feature creep extreme.
Yeah. Crunch is that long-term drag of hours upon hours upon hours.
That's 6 months to a year.
That's really, really rough. Like I would say even over a month is pretty long crunch. You're in crunch land if it's over a month, especially when it's not the end of the project. And this isn't really towards Naughty Dog or anything. It's been the industry since I've been in it. Like lots of times I've had pull in 72, 96-hour shifts, trying to hit a milestone.
Was that sleeping at work or sleeping in the car?
That was not sleeping. That was being up that many hours to hit a milestone, right? But for me, I think crunch, especially long term, is a symptom of poor planning.
Correct answer. That's good. Yeah. I feel the same way. That's the correct answer. I think there is a fine line of what you're saying. At the end of a project, when you already know you got something that's like golden, that's one thing. But then there's that other thing where you do have those passionate people who will stay, and you see them on your teams everywhere you go. Like, why is this guy here till 9
but a
or
lot of
to
times
10? It's different than crunch.
Sometimes it's that peer pressure too.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's not really necessary, but you feel like odd man out if the other guys you've done your work, right?
I see what you mean.
But then the others are still there long term on their task or something, and you kind of
that's an
camaraderie.
That's an experience thing
pressure.
though. That's an experience thing though, because I can see how if you are new to the industry and you're like, oh, I notice around me everyone's here, I'm gonna be here. You get that Las Vegas vibe where everything's lit all nice. You don't even know what time of day it is outside anymore. Yeah. It's that. But with the experience, I can only speak for myself because right now I feel like if I already met my joy fulfillment of like, hey, I want to get these tasks done, I got them done within the day.
Yeah.
There's no need for me to stay late. Yeah. Now if I'm working on a task with someone else and I notice they're staying late and we're like, hey, you want to get this in tonight? All right, I'm down with that. I could do that, But again, I don't think that's crunch. That's not crunch.
Yeah, that's not crunch. That falls into the realm of some overtime.
Yeah.
To get it where
even though it's not paid overtime, it's overtime.
It's pride overtime. It's extra hours to put that polish on.
Yeah.
Because some stuff it really is passion. Like a lot of the long hours we worked at Naughty Dog, and it shows in the little details. Most of that stuff wasn't like in the design. It was passionate people wanting to do all these little bits and details, and it's all in the details, and that's what makes it. But when you wind up with everyone's there, long hours for days and months, and that's poor planning.
Yeah. And it shows like the dedication and the passion that's in those projects. Man, those are beautiful games.
Yeah.
Beautiful games.
But it is crunch in that sense of how long that went on.
Yeah.
But that's not just a symptom of poor planning. It's a symptom of how the industry has shifted too. With live service, DLC, it's like there's no break anymore. It's
the media consumption of people.
Oh, we went gold, and you're still pushing because now you got to have like a day 0 patch or this next patch or DLC started.
You're chasing the players,
chasing that,
make sure they have stuff to play.
And then stuff like being part of multiple projects at once, which being the mocap TD and Naughty Dog was.
Yeah.
So I was doing all the mocap for anything we were doing. So as long as there was project, I was working.
Yeah. So you went from DICE to Virtual Humans technical art director, Seed. What is Seed?
So Seed is EA's research group.
Okay.
That they started a couple years ago. And they're spread globally. And they started out of Stockholm, and initially when they announced, they were called Frostbite Labs.
Ah, I know the Frostbite engine. Yes.
Yeah. But it wasn't part of Frostbite, so that was confusing with the company. So, but also they wanted to really define this group as a research group for EA. So that's where they made SEED, which stands for the Search for Extraordinary Experiences Division. And so they have like people focus on machine learning and neural network stuff, and people focused on
so not so much IPs, just technology.
It's research into emerging technologies and where to go, right? And we had a group that was called the Virtual Humans Group. So when I was with DICE and that project got canceled that I was on, it just made sense for me to then continue what they hired me to do, which was develop, push their characters, push face rigs, push all of that. This was the right group to be in to do it.
Yeah, because virtual humans is more along that Gemini Man type thing, right? Where it's like a full body.
There's a lot of that. It should have
human.
been virtual characters, digital characters.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of push on how to push the human development further, because we have a lot of humans in our games. We have sports and all that, and that's always going to be humans. And it's we have that challenge, and it's still a challenge. And there was a lot of experience of people that is taking your experiences in film and how to bring that into games, especially as the work and the level of quality is getting very even because the technology is catching up, right? I don't know what these next-gen consoles are going to have, but it's going to be a point of where I said the workflows are already
it's going to be like Black Mirror. We're all going to get that little puck thing in our temples.
Oh, man, that was such a great episode. But that was still with EA, so I just moved within EA to the research group, and they were doing a lot of vision change and stuff that happened, and they had the technical director role at Capture Lab, or EA's Capture Group.
So was the Virtual Humans, was that a lot more focused on the scanning of people and because you were mentioning
how to automate processes, how to get better data. So it was focused on how we can scan and actually get better data. So, things like the light stage at ICT that used on a lot of films, things like that we've been looking into technologies at Realm and incorporating, and and how to really bring in how to make our characters more realistic, our humans. But at the same time, there was effort in just how do we make our characters better, right? So a lot of the learnings we can learn from scanning people and diving into how the light actually works on the skin and reflectance and your specularity and all that information that can be applied to other characters too, to just make them more lifelike, even though they're maybe made up characters in a world of who knows what.
Yeah.
There's still, if you're going for this realism in your world, which all sports titles and stuff, it's very towards that realm. So a lot of focus was there on how we can keep pushing that quality. So if your plan as that player, which you spend all this money scanning and creating, you want that player and how to make that even closer. So you're looking at like stuff like they did with Gemini Man, or even just I guess I've heard there's rumors of James Dean coming in a movie or something, right?
I saw that on
that kind
internet.
of effort on how you can and bring that into games.
I think they might be deep faking that though, man. I think they will.
We'll see
because he's got a huge collection of films.
But most of his stuff was black and white, so that might be true.
Yeah, but they might even make the film black and white. I think there's another film coming out that's black and white with Defoe and some other person. But it's all in black. It's called Lighthouse something, and it looks amazing. But it's all shot in that old school grainy black and white.
We'll see what they do with it, but and if they go deep fake, then good on them using a tool that's actually progressed to a point it can be used at a larger scale, right? But if you look at even the hours and info on the one with the comedian that was doing all the impressions, it was crazy amounts of hours on GPU time to
Yeah, but
solve that, right?
you gotta think about it. Like, even if it is a crazy amount of hours, that's one guy. Imagine like a full studio working on capturing as many facial expressions out of his old films, because he's gonna look.
Right,
I
but
guarantee he's
no
gonna
one-
look
but
like
no
he did in
one's
the
doing
past.
that manually.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? The thing is, they have, usually have scrubbers and things like that are tools that go
Yeah.
into the films, and they're just pulling this face
Pulling it,
out,
yeah.
and you're getting some input from people, to giving kind of a lot of what you do with machine learning, where it's punishment reward system,
Yeah.
right? And that's how it learns. It's like it wants the rewards.
Yeah.
You gotta come up with what those rewards are, right? So, and sometimes though it's people going, that's a face, right?
Yeah.
Or that's that person, definitely, and approving it, so that then the training model gets built up and it is that person stuff, and you don't accidentally get this other face that was in there.
Yeah.
that
I think
you
with the
expected
what
from.
face tracking is now, though, I think they could do something that would be automated in his old films. Like, you pop the disc in, you
Oh, yeah.
have it being read by something, and then he's on screen. You're like, marquee, boop, and that thing will just track.
Yeah, but they have things that actually just go scrub through the frames and find the face and pull it out, and then you
Yeah.
kind of need someone to go, yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
When it
That
has
is a
those
cactus.
images.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a cactus that
Yeah.
happens to look like a face,
Yeah.
or that's a wall socket,
Yeah. Yeah.
But of course, those things are getting smarter too. But
Yeah. It'd be like those images. What was that? It wasn't Google. What was that where like it took an image of like a dog and like
The
something,
face
and it puts
swap,
in
right?
the face swap thing. But then it's all like colored, like you're on like an acid trip or something like that.
That's the deep image? No,
That's creepy.
yeah, it's deep mind.
Deep mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is a bit more abstract thing,
Yeah.
right? But that's kind of a basis of a lot
Of
of
the
the
learning,
stuff where
yeah.
it came from. It's if you look at it, it's like you believe that's a frog on acid driven out and whatever, right? Like it's that basis. It's where it's evolved from. Is a lot of that stuff, the deep mind and these neural networks that
Yeah.
then they're actually, because they've been doing a lot of that stuff for a long time. It's just a matter of now it's like at a point where we have plenty of GPUs and things to actually train it in a more reasonable fashion. I have
Yeah.
a really good buddy of mine, JP Lewis, who, back in the 80s was writing these things, but he could never solve them because the time it took to solve that giant algorithm, or the computer time was,
Yeah.
years, right?
Yeah.
To solve that. And so there was a lot of that where it's now come to the point where we have machines in the cloud and ways that we can mass solve this big problem, this big math problem faster, right? And it's still hours,
Yeah.
like that it's doing
still takes a long
right?
time, yeah.
And a lot of cloud usage, I'll tell you
So
that.
I want to ask, since you've touched on working on a plethora of films and games, what is the most challenging? I know they're slowly, convening to be kind of the same production-wise of what things you need to keep in mind and what processes you use. But
Yeah.
what do you find the most challenging? Is it working on a film, or is it working on a game?
I think for a long time, I felt it was more challenging working on film because you had a higher quality standard you had to reach to. But now that, like I said, I've just found there's a bit more challenge in games, because the challenge now in games is to hit what we're doing in film, but not like what we were doing in film 10 years ago. It's like what we're doing in films now. And that's where it becomes, I guess, a more in-your-face challenge, right? But I would say to do the work up until you render it, it's pretty much the same work.
Yeah, you get more eyes on it too,
pipelines
though, instead of just gamers.
Uh,
If that makes sense. So I think in the
Yeah,
gaming
I
community,
that.
they're a lot more forgiving, because they're like, oh, I understand you got 100 players in this map,
I
and
know, I know what
you know.
forums you've been on, but I tell you.
I mean, they want it high quality too, but I think when you talk about a film, people can easily look at a film and go, that doesn't look like it's going to be that good, as opposed to a game where you're like, the gameplay is really shining in this, and they don't really care about the fidelity of the
It
art.
depends on the thing, as much as there's Naughty Dog lovers,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. There's a broad spectrum, and the thing is, in the gamer community, I feel they're much more vocal
Yeah. I can see that.
online about it.
Yeah.
And
They
that
vent
shows
more.
up when you're playing online, and there's this whole online world, whereas in film, it's still not that, right? It's a human personal experience with
Yeah.
going to see a film or with your family, but it's not like you're going with the whole community. There is a lot of reviews and stuff like that, and there are certain ones where people just hammer it, but like every game.
But with the
feels like
media,
is
though, the different medium that those two entertainment venues are on, the movie's not going to change. If the movie's already out, it's not going to change unless you knew something about it while it was in production. Much like Sonic the Hedgehog, for example, they put out a trailer. People were like, "Boo!" Like, we're not going to go see it. Oh God! Let's remake Sonic, right? That's different, and that's kind of unheard of, which is happening more often these days. But in games, with it being that experience where it's a user-based experience, they know a patch can come out.
Yes.
DLC can come out that would change things. So I can see why they're more vocal. But in a movie setting, it's like, they took a shot, It's entertaining, but, it's not going to, they're not going to make a sequel.
Well, the big one is, like, depending upon who the game developer is and stuff like that, if you're looking at, like, Sony or you're looking at Microsoft to have their own consoles, right? The big goal is to sell consoles, right? Whereas film, it's like your film has to make its money back and make profit for the investors, or see ya, right?
Yeah.
And so it's an always like working at, no matter what company you're at, when you make a film, it's like you're always at that startup.
Yeah.
Hitting that next milestone, make sure we make our money to keep going on the next one. Yeah. Whereas games, it's like there's a lot of different aspects of how you can monetize with that game, right? It isn't just about the game. It could be some toys. It could be this, and there is some of that tie into.
Movies still go that way too.
But games
with
are
toys.
more with it, right? Like, in that sense, like that's a huge expected piece, right? Because it's franchises you're building. Where not every film is trying to be a franchise,
right?
No, there's lots of them that are franchises.
I don't think they made toys for Schindler's List.
I don't know if you'd want to have that toy.
Right?
That would be pretty messed up.
Right? But there are some movies, and I think you're right. I think it does go more towards those family experience type films, like all the Disney franchise and all those are like toys and other experiences and other things you can purchase outside of it.
Yeah. But there's a lot. It's just. And that's what the growing kind of environment of what video games are now. It's like there is an expectation of if there's something wrong with it, you're going to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a hard challenge.
Yeah.
Now, I try to stay away from having to deal with that challenge. My job is to make sure the stuff gets done, right? But it is... more you learn over time, but it is that's where there's a lot more challenge in games, because with film, the film's got to be good, people got to like it and go see it, and then get it on digital and get it on streaming and pay for that. Where with the game, it's like the problem is you could make a great game, but then there's something wrong with it, and that's going to be the focus because it can be fixed.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of, I think, with all the feedback, which, if it's broken, there's bugs, yes, raise it and do that stuff and let us fix it. But I think the people doing the work are getting left in the dust of when one thing's wrong with it over what they have spent years creating. I think it's a less rewarding at times when you put out a new game, because everyone remembers the bad thing, no matter how many good things there were, and it stands out more, right? And so you get overshadowed a lot in the games industry, because if there's something broken or a bug or something crazy, that becomes a focus, and there's a lot less praise, I would say, overall from the community for the game that's come out, but definitely.
Yeah, and it's crazy
but
how
some of it is most people that find something wrong and that bugs them are usually more vocal
because it's not a
to
showstopper.
worry about something wrong
Yeah.
than, and it's in anything like complaining at a restaurant. Like
Yeah.
something's wrong, you complain and try to get it fixed, but you don't always thank the people.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of people, it's not about getting it fixed. It's about that ego of like, I found something wrong.
Yes.
And I want everyone here to know that I found something wrong. I think that's the biggest issue when it comes to games, because
With the online community as it is now, it's a lot of it is about that, is bringing the attention from something and jumping on to try to monetize that for yourself or some sort of gain for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the community online has always been, right? Like
I don't think that's ever going to go away.
Yeah.
I think online makes it where more people can become critics, as opposed to back in the day when you had your Siskel and Eberts, where it's like, this guy is a professional critic, you know? That's never going to change.
Now everyone's a critic.
Yeah.
And they get a platform to voice
do
it
it,
on,
yeah.
yes.
So now from Seed, you are now where you are currently. Crazy, man. That's a wild ride. I've learned some new things about you tonight.
Yeah, I'm still at EA.
Yeah.
Been there for almost 4 years.
Yeah.
I've just transitioned through a couple roles.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just kind of been my whole career is filling a role that needs to be filled and making sure I have the right skill set to do it. And because sometimes when you're working in a role, you start seeing there's a problem over here, you're not directly involved in, but you can help. And that's kind of how it's kind of happened too over time, is like, I noticed this thing that y'all had. I'm a problem solver. That's what I do, right?
Yeah.
But I would say the biggest thing is, as like a technical director or tech artist or anything like that, the way I like to describe my job the best is I spend every day making myself obsolete, right? So that then I can move on to do bigger, better things. So my job
That's a different way of looking at it, yeah.
Like I'm a problem solver. I write tools that then automate stuff. So then I'm not spending all my time redoing that stuff. So
when it comes to the maintaining of the tools, do you just have another set of people that would do that, or is that something you would have to take on?
If it's a tool I developed, I would keep that support.
Okay.
Until it gets to a point of, okay,
No
now it's
time.
only like red phone support for this thing. Now we've moved on to new developments and new stuff. But I always try to make sure I'm supporting what I've developed. But now I manage like a team, so it's more of them handling the current needs while I look at the big picture down the road stuff.
Well, here's a good question. So where you are now, we don't need to go back in the past, but where you are now, how large is the team that's utilized for something like that, for what you do and to maintain what it is that you provide for the studio?
So right now I have 6 tech artists on my team but then I'm also not managing, but what we call stakeholders, in the sense of, because we have our central tools and technology group, which they develop bigger tool sets. From the group I'm managing, we do some big tools, but we rely on these software engineers in the other group to maintain and develop on like very large tools, so that we can focus on, our roadmap which is huge as it is. Like we'd lose a whole person probably just to maintain one of our big custom proprietary capture tools, as we call it, right? That really requires a software engineer to an extent, because it's dealing with databases and this and that. That's really software engineering work. Not to say we aren't writing big tools in our stuff, but we're maintaining, and a lot of it we're also maintaining the support day to day on production, some mocap shooting, things like that. Checking the cameras and the systems and cables, but we're also designing and building our own hardware for scanning and things like that. We showed off a custom portable scan rig at CES last year in the Canon booth this past year in Vegas. Like Canon asked us to come show it off. We weren't like selling it or doing scanning. We
That's
just
awesome.
brought the rig and showed it, and that was kind of a big milestone for companies like EA in the sense of like showing these proprietary internally used things publicly. So that was a big deal. But the team itself is 6 there, and then working with other groups too. So even part of my job, I'm not with Seed anymore, but part of my job is to kind of be a key point of contact of taking research they're doing and helping move it into production.
So out of the 6, this thought popped into my head. Is that group of 6 that works closely with you a set of problem solvers or implementers?
They're problem solvers.
Okay. Oh, that's cool.
They do implement a lot, but that's implementing the solution.
Yeah.
But they spend a lot of time talking with the rest of the team. So we have our post-solving team, and we have our face-solving team, and we have our acquisition team, which are the teams that actually run the day-to-day shoots and capture the data or do the scanning. And so we're always solving problems there to maintain that and keep them running, but we're always looking at how we improve, looking into stuff like virtual production tools and things like that.
That's cool.
But that's split between Vancouver and LA. So LA is newer. We just built a new mocap stage and stuff out in Chatsworth, a new mocap facility. So I've been building up a team here. So I have two of the TAs are here in LA with me.
Nice.
And focused on the efforts that are going on, but I'm still traveling and flying up to Vancouver and.
That's what I was going to ask next was, do you have to travel a lot for your role?
I travel a lot.
That's awesome.
Put a lot of miles.
Yeah.
A lot of miles. I'm actually going to Stockholm in a couple weeks because we have like a central like Dev Days conference out in Stockholm where DICE house from for the Frostbite engine and all that, which we use on a lot of our titles. So,
oh, cool.
So that's an
Isn't
EA
that cool
engine,
when you can like get to travel and get more exposure out there, seeing how people live, how people communicate and stuff. It's awesome.
I really enjoy the travel as part of my job. Because, and this is one of the newer jobs where I've had that.
Yeah, it's a good feeling.
And the other ones, it was very rare to travel because I was at studios where, other than going on location like a digital domain to go shoot in England or whatever on a film.
Yeah.
This is like, I'm going 2 days to Montreal, and then I'm going to fly up to Edmonton, and then come back to Vancouver for a week, and then I'm going to jump over to Stockholm, and then go to Guildford,
That's awesome.
because we're global. So there's a lot of requirement in my role to jump over there because we're a central group. We work with all these teams, so it's really getting FaceTime with them, planning. So yeah, it's been really rewarding.
That's cool, man.
Job, yeah.
So is there anything that you want to leave the viewers, that student, that person that may be looking to change roles, that person who is probably in the same profession, just not up to the level that you have accomplished already? What are some of the things that you would leave them with? You've already left a lot of great gems of being able to adapt, being able to always be learning. But what is something that you want to leave as our interviews coming like to an end and stuff? Like, what are some of the things you want to leave to that person?
A couple of things I would say, like for the students coming out of school and you're working on demo reels and stressing and you're learning a lot of stuff. From my experience, and I've been a people hirer for a long time and worked with a lot of others. Less is more is a big thing. It's better to have 2, 3 great pieces that really showcase you than 100 kind of pieces that you just pump to try to get a lot, right? Like really focus on an effort of selling yourself in that way. Like what do you do that makes you shine? And just really make the highest quality 1 or 2 of those you can. Right, and and it doesn't have to be the whole package. Like, you don't have to expect that, because we are more, I guess. How would you put it? It's like
Are you trying to say like because there are teams when you actually do things in final production? There's teams of people who work and focus on different disciplines.
Yes.
So if you can
they're
focus
very
on the one
discipline
discipline,
focused,
yeah,
right? It doesn't have to be a generalist on everything. You don't.
yeah,
You can be a character artist and not do textures, right? Like you can be, and if your forte is building these characters, you can always learn to do the texturing, right? Because there's also going to be so much proprietary stuff. Like you're always going to have to learn, and that's why I always say keep learning. But it is a requirement. Like you have to learn, and sometimes you feel you're going into it, especially new, thinking you have to know it all to pull off that role, and you don't, as long as what you show that's selling you makes people see the potential of what you can do, right? So if you're not great at texturing, but you're a good learner, but you're an amazing sculptor or whatever, like show that, and don't be afraid to show that.
yeah. Keep that thing grayscale. It'll still look great.
Yeah, and get help from your friends too. Like if you know someone that's great at lighting, have them do a little light rig for you, trade off some work, give them a little character that they can then show up their lighting more, like work with your friends, network, help each other out. But do know, like, when you're trying to get that foot in the door, and it's hard. I've gotten lucky, and we've talked about, I've had gaps in there where I wasn't working, and even after years of doing it, we're trying to find a job. It doesn't get easier in the sense of finding a new job, right? Getting a new foot in the door. But that's why it's so important to always network and to make sure that you remember you may work with any of these people again, no matter where you're at years down the road. So make sure that crunch can make things stressful. Stress can just be stressful trying to get stuff done. Make sure that you are remembering that and compartmentalizing as best you can, like the sense of business versus friendship versus camaraderie.
Yeah, don't blow up on people.
Don't blow up. Don't fight with people. Don't, because it's all important. I've done it for so long, because when I do find myself in a problem, I don't have a job and stuff, I have people I can just say, hey, if you hear anything, and they will do that because they would want to work with me again, or they want to make sure that I'm taken care of, because I've spent my time making sure I'm not pissing people off, right? Like,
and they know your value. They see the value you bring to the projects that
but they
you're
also
on.
like working with me,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Because no matter how good you are, I've not hired people because their impression and how they are versus the weight of what they could offer, no matter how good their skill set is, doesn't mean I want to work with them. Yeah. And that's another key thing is you matter, even though you may feel like, they just want to see my work and have a workhorse. It's never the case.
It's all about the team structure, team morale.
Yep.
Bringing on that one wrong person can spiral you down to like
down, make you unhappy. You want to be happy doing your job, whether you have to work with them directly or not.
It could bring people's work down. It's a huge impact on a team.
Huge impact. And so those are two key things, which is, sell what you know. Don't push too hard to try to sell what you don't know yet, because you can always learn, and you will learn. For the real and stuff like that. But then, and then the other point is I have my term that I've been writing a talk, and it's just, I'll say it, don't be a Richard, right?
Okay, what's that?
In
what
the
is
nice
that?
way, right?
Don't be a okay.
Yes, in the nice way. I mean, but it is kind of, and I've told that even to when I was being interviewed. It's like, that's what I live by every day when I'm working. And just don't be a Richard. Yeah. Right?
I think a lot of people, they'll catch themselves if they feel they're coming across that way. Yeah. They'll just say it and be like, I'm not trying to be this way. I mean, that's a lot of, you're going to get that. That's a whole nother conversation of like conflict of ideas or what have you. Like, people don't intend to be that way. It's communication. It's just
it's
how people communicate.
And but it's very important.
Yeah.
and you have to think about it all the time.
Yeah.
It's no matter how
Perception.
stressful, because it changes people's perception and whether because it comes down to, even like I was saying, it gets overshadowed. No matter how good all the stuff is,
Yeah.
that moment
That one
could
thing.
mean they'll never work with you again,
Yeah.
right? And I've seen that, and I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
And because everyone remembers a very bad experience. But
And it
it's
could even be your
easy-
reaction to something. Like, you could have been the person that was receiving the wrongdoing, but it's your reaction to it that people would just be like, oh my God, did
Yeah.
you see what they did? And it's like, no one remembers
Yeah.
what the catalyst was to make you be that way.
No, they remember the moment
Yeah.
that was a bad experience
Yeah.
way more than they remember all the good times.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is overall. But it becomes that when you are looking to have to jump to another company, or you're looking for a job because the company you worked at shut down or laid a bunch of people off, like it's part of the networking. It's part of something to always consider. I mean, I've done it 29 years, and I've got a lot of places I've worked at. Only a couple of them I've actually left during the time they were open, but
You have a lot of great work too, man, on your
Thank
resume,
you.
dude.
But
It's awesome.
I appreciate that a lot. But a lot of it is those companies don't exist anymore, except for Naughty Dog. Digital Domain is Digital Domain 3.0 now.
Yeah.
And then I'm at EA. All the rest of the companies I've worked at aren't around anymore. Even LucasArts, right? Like, I mean,
Oh yeah, that went down. Yeah.
but it's, it's that sense of, if you look at my history, none of those companies exist anymore.
Yeah. I think the other crazy thing too, I think when we were there, that was a luxury of the company. Like, let me put that in a different way. So ILM is their bread and butter.
Yeah.
But LucasArts was always just like a vanity, like, I want a game studio. This is,
Yeah,
Jet wants some games made. so
Basically,
he's like,
yeah.
Dad, make these games in LucasArts.
I remember
you
when
know?
he interned for that summer. That was,
Yeah.
that was funny. He was doing crank calls on Hayden.
It's pretty funny.
But yeah, he sat like right next to me during his internship.
It's hilarious.
So it was fun to see like George and his entourage come in and do the dad thing on his first day
Yeah.
and stuff, and see him as a person.
Yeah.
That was a good, cool experience to see.
I think
And
the
taking
one thing
pictures
that-
of his desk and stuff,
The one thing I experienced was we were doing like the whole IP, like Team 3, we were doing a bunch of IP ideas. And then what came out of one of the things when we were talking to like Peter Hirschman and can't remember the other guy's name, but he was like, Dad, I want a racing game. And he was like, well, I made Pod Racer. What do you want? He was like, I want something different than Pod Racer. And so like we had to do all these pitches. We went back and then we showed all the ideas to them, and they're like, oh, we want it to be like, 50 style cars, old world cars, but with new tech. And it's just like, oh my God. Like, and that's all we got. And then we just had to like come up with what this whole game would be. But, they only give you like maybe 3 bullet points of like, I want this, this, and this. And it's crazy, man. It was crazy.
Well, speaking of that, like I do work with Peter Hirschman again.
Oh, nice.
Out of all this time,
Respawn?
yeah. He's at Respawn,
Yeah.
which EA purchased last year.
Yeah, nice.
Them and Industrial Toys. But yeah, it's that whole thing. Like, it all comes around.
Jim Ward.
Jim Ward.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave that. We'll leave that.
Yeah. Well, that's cool,
We
man.
slowed it down on purpose.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I do appreciate you taking the time to come here and talk.
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
this is
It's
going to
great
be
to catch
very valuable for people who are looking to get into industry, who are already in industry, or just enthusiasts who like to dabble. But it was great seeing you again. It was great talking to you. Dude, we got to keep in contact more often.
Oh,
That's
definitely.
good.
It's been too long since we talked. I
Yeah.
know. We've kind of pinged each other a couple times over
Yeah.
the years, but it was
I still
great to
remember when we
actually-
went out. I think you told me like you're like, oh man, I'm about to go for a smoke break. I don't smoke,
Yeah.
but I remember going out and sitting on the bench. I still remember our conversation a little bit when we were sitting out there in the Presidio. Like
Yeah.
I think that was the first time we had like a genuine conversation outside of work.
Yeah.
Like, and we just talked, and I was just like, oh my God,
Yeah. But no,
Very
I remember
ambitious,
That. I
you know,
remember
it's
it. I was, yeah.
good
a lot of people
times.
have distinct memories of.
Yeah.
And you're definitely one of those. And that's.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah. It's like your name
That's
pops
awesome.
up and I just know it. It's not
Nice.
one of those you got to think back like, ooh, who was that?
Yeah,
I've had a
yeah.
few of
I appreciate
those.
that. That's cool. I appreciate that. Thank
But
you.
yeah. But no, I'm glad we got together, and thanks for having me out.
No problem, dude. Thank you very much. Well, I hope you guys learned something new. We'll be back soon with another interview, but please check out this man's work. He has done a great job, and I'm looking forward to all the continued success in the future.
We got the new Need for Speed.
Yeah, nice. Oh, Heat.
Yeah. Worked
Nice.
on the face tech that's being used in that. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You know what? I just watched the trailer yesterday because I think some people got it early and they were already streaming it.
Oh, somebody
And it was
already
the
put
police
together,
chief like talking at a podium, and I was like, that looks pretty good. It's very much on par with LA Noire, but it's not the same
Yep.
style of the projection when they did it. I was
it's a full
blown away, man.
animation rig, wrinkle maps, all that. So it's not like the projection technique. But
Yeah.
But yeah, someone's already put together on YouTube all cutscenes from the game already.
No
Which is
spoilers,
annoying.
man.
Yeah,
I
don't
definitely
go
want to pick
spoil
that
it,
one up.
but
That
if
one
you
looks
wanna
really
peek
good.
at some of the face stuff and things that we worked on.
Yeah.
They're all there, so I won't
nice.
tell the link to the YouTube. Or
Yeah,
anything,
don't. No
and
spoilers. No spoilers. You want people to go
no
buy it.
spoilers, But
So
yeah, but that's kind of annoying.
it happens, man. I think people, with YouTube and streaming, Twitch, and all this other stuff, people just want to be the first one out the gate.
I mean, that used to
And-
be the thing is
Yeah.
first post.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not first, you're last.
Yeah. I love that.
but-
Love taking it.
But thank you guys. I hope you learned something new. Thanks. Have a good night.